theory that states that innate drives, the drive that comes from within, are the ones that motivate ourselves. And then the second one is hierarchy of needs theory, which means that there is a system of needs that should be fulfilled in order to reach our full potential. So for example, if you are tired or you are sleepy or you are hungry, which is a very basic needs that need to be fulfilled, you cannot focus on your goal, and so you cannot focus on higher attainment. So therefore, we should fulfill the more basic needs first before pursuing the higher goals. And then the third one is self-control theory. So in this theory, students need to be in control. So when they are in control, they will reach their highest motivation. So on the contrary, if the teacher always puts the students' motivation will diminish because they have to conform to others' will. And this one is the pyramid of hierarchy of needs, starting from physical needs and eventually to self-actualization. And next is we are going to the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So basically, intrinsic motivation is when people engage in an activity for their own sake. Often they aim to achieve internally rewarding consequences such as self-determination and feelings of competence, while extrinsic motivation is when people engage in an activity when to gain extrinsic rewards from outside of themselves, like grades, money, or even positive feedback from the teachers. And then this image illustrates how intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is different. So this intrinsic motivation comes from within ourselves, and extrinsic motivations are from outside of ourselves. And next is by the time Brown's book was published in 2001, most of the scholars favor intrinsic motivation over extrinsic motivation because extrinsic motivation is criticized for its addictive nature, because students will become dependent on the rewards that are offered by the authorities, and as the result, students start to please authorities because they've become dependent on the rewards, and because of that, there is a harsh competition among the peers instead of collaborating amongst the peers in order to achieve their goals. And they are also afraid of failures and afraid to take risks to innovate. And also there is an example of research that indicate about the power of intrinsic motivation. So there are two groups of teenage girls that are given the task to teach games to children, and the first group was told that they would receive a reward if they had successfully completed the task, and then the second group was simply given the task, and the result is the second group complete the task faster, and they have greater pleasure and more success than the first group. So we move on to how to initiate intrinsic motivation in education. So as I have mentioned before, that the traditional education usually use extrinsic rewards in their education. Therefore, it makes the students dependent on the rewards, and they also become afraid of failures and strive to please the authorities. And also the curriculum are often politically influenced, and I think they are still influenced by politics. And some even do not involve the teachers. Society and parents also force their values to the students for their conformity and so on. And so Brown suggests that the institutions that take extrinsic elements like this to turn them into intrinsically oriented direction. For example, the curriculum can be modified to include student-centered learning, and the teachers also can personalize the activities in order to gain greater self-esteem for the students and to give them the chances to choose for autonomy, and they can also have a higher chance of self-actualization. And for society values, the classroom can discuss and evaluate society values from a critical aspect, and so they would not forced to conform into any particular way of thinking or acting, and they will have that sense of belonging and harmony. And then the next one is how to initiate and sustain intrinsic motivation in the second language classroom. There are some suggestions from Brown and also other experts. This one is a checklist to check whether the technique that the teachers use in the classroom is intrinsically motivating or not. And then there are also 10 commandments where these 10 commandments are from the actual teachers on the field. So you can also use this. And then the last one, Brown also suggests to compare 10 commandments with his 6 general guidelines. And then we move on to the related theories from other books. So I take Teaching and Researching Motivation from Donye and Ushioda's second edition book. Actually, there's a third edition published in 2021, but I cannot get the book, so I just use the older version. So there are 3 things that I want to highlight from Donye and Ushioda's book. The first one is about the definition of motivation. So Donye and Ushioda mentioned that because the researchers are usually tend to focus on one aspect of the motivation. So there is no motivational theory that can define motivation in its entirety that include all of the aspects. Is it fine?
Teh Nur, it's already 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Teh Nur.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the next speaker will be Teh Rizky Denarti. So get ready. The screen is yours.
Okay, let me share the screen first. Good morning, Bunedan and friends. Today I would like to present my reading report summary from Ushioda entitled Motivation and Good Language Learner. And here's the brief outline of my presentation today. And then let's move to the next slide. And in 1972, as Gardner and Lambert stated, learning motivation is qualitatively different from other forms of learning motivation, since language learning entails much more than acquiring a body of knowledge and developing a set of skills. That means that the beliefs of learner attitudes affect the success of the language learning. And Gardner from his research also distinction the motivation into integrative and instrumental motivation. He found out that the integrative learners are more successful than instrumental. However, his statements got criticism from other researchers that show that instrumental motivation also equally important too with integrative motivation. And many researchers also showed that instrumental, many researchers also showed that learner-teachers interaction can increase the learner's motivation, as in Ushio's chapters in 2008 stated, good language learners are motivated. Then why a good language learner are motivated? What does it mean? So it means that the motivation comes from within, or it could be called intrinsic motivation and integrative motivation. And as we know, intrinsic motivation is the where the learners do the activity because they want to, and they feel enjoyed and interest with something they are doing. On the contrary, intrinsic motivation is where the learners inject in to gain the reward, such as a high grades or a increase in pay or to avoid punishment. And social context also influences motivation. By socializing, the students will affect their quality and level of learning success, because the quality and level of language learning success will be influenced by the extent to which surrounding social practices support or hinder learners access to their community's linguistic resources. And with social context, students will learn about various culture and make a relationship by socializing. And we also we also shouldn't forget that the learner should be self-aware too of their needs and strategies, because it could keep them on track on study. And for the important thing is teacher role in the classroom. Teacher role is to encourage learner motivation, support, and make them interested. And as Ushoda stated in 2008, he stated two key principles to maintain motivation. The first one is motivation must emanate from the learner, and the second one is learners must see themselves as the agents of the process that shape their motivation. Then let's move to the next slide. The related theories from other books I choose from Harmer in 2007, entitled How to Teach English. In his book, Harmer stated, the desire to achieve some goals is the bedrock of motivation, and if it's strong enough, it provokes a decision to act. For instance, an EFL learner study English to travel abroad. So this motivation that is influenced by some external factors named external motivation. Meanwhile, the motivation that comes inside the classroom, such as the teacher's method or activities in the students take part in, is named intrinsic motivation. And however, it is hard for the teacher to sustain the learner's motivation all the time, because they have to deal with learners with different personalities. So what the teacher should do, in his book, Harmer display four steps to sustain the students' motivation. The first one is involve the students to take part in learning, provoke them to stay interested and curious about the subject. And the second is create a level of challenge so that things are neither too difficult nor too easy for the students. And the third is consider the issue of the effect. The students need to feel that the teacher really cares about them. Then if students feel supported and valued, they are far more likely to be motivated to learn. And the last one is giving the students some agency. It is a term borrowed from social sciences. And then let's move to the next slide. As we know that Harmer is emphasizing in point number 4, that is giving the students some agency. It means that the students should take some responsibility for their own learning, and they should be like to be doers in the class. So, however, the students still have a thought that in teaching learning process is the teacher's role to offering the material to the students, and the students is only receive it from the students and from the teachers, I mean. So that is why Harmer displays several parts to avoid this situation. The first one is extending the students' role in the learning process. That shows them that they could take part in the teaching learning process too. And the second is getting students to do various kinds of homework, such as written exercises and composition or further study. And the third one is lead them to use monolingual learners dictionaries. It is to encourage them to become autonomous and help them to understand how and when they use these dictionaries. And the last is show them where they can continue studying outside the classroom. And it would be better if the school has a self-access center with a range of resources comprising books for students, so they are comfortable to find another resources other than the teacher. And for the related research reports, I have Weger in 2013. His research, he conducted a research entitled Examining English Language Learning Motivation of Adult International Learners Studying Abroad in the US. He showed that the results showed that attest to a dualistic nature of instrumentality, and the learner are motivated by sense of personal pride rather than by positive attitude toward English community. And then we have Lai in 2013, who conducted a research entitled The Motivation of Learners of English as a Foreign Language Revisited. Lai found out that there is no differences between day and night students' motivation, and EFL students have intrinsic motivation in studying English. And then we have Wahyudi, who conducted a research entitled What Does Good Language Learner, or GLL, Say About Foreign Language Learning? A story from an Indonesian learner. Wahyudi found out the result of questionnaire seems to indicate that the respondent characterizes from characteristic of good language learner. And then we have Sykes with the good language learner revisited a case study. Sykes found out that the learners who take charge of their language learning and actively participate in language learning activities in the classroom have substantially higher success rate in second language acquisition rather than the students who are not active in the class. And then we have Mashur with a research entitled Influence of Motivation and Language Learning Environment on the Successful EFL Learning. Mashur found out what makes the successful EFL learner is different from other learner is their commitment to the study, in their commitment in the learning English. And then the last is we have Sentosa, who conducted a research entitled Motivasi dalam Pembelajaran Bahasa Inggris, Studi Kasus pada Mahasiswa Jurusan Pendidikan Bahasa Inggris IAIN Surakarta. The result showed that the subject of the case study exhibited many of the characteristics of the hypothetical good language learner in the identified from a review of relevant literature. And then let's move to the next slide. Here's my critical analysis. As we know that motivation is a crucial part of learning. That is it is a major factor for other people to be success in learning language. And motivation also categorized as interrogative, instrumental, intrinsic, and extrinsic motivation. As we know, the interrogative and intrinsic motivation is from within, and instrumental and extrinsic motivation comes from the outside of the learner. And a good language learner means that the learner is motivated, and the majority of the motivation is coming from within. However, it's not adequate to depends on the motivation from within only, because we need also see the situation of the learner too. So the teacher should make the situation in the classroom is comfortable for the student, and also the teacher should make should use the method that could increase the students' motivation. So if the classroom is sufficient and the teacher also is teach in a good way, it could increase the students' motivation. And we know that the research learners self-awareness of motivation is still scarce. Mostly other researchers only compare which motivation is better between intrinsic or extrinsic motivation. All the motivation is, yes.
The time is over. Thank you very much for your presentation. So let's move on to the last presenter, which is Timo. So Timo, are you ready?
Sorry, I'm not yet ready.
Welcome, Ibu.
Sorry, I'm not yet ready. Please.
Okay. Ibu Nende, have you created your slides, Timo?
Sorry, no.
Okay.
Okay. Have you seen the? Have you sent the pre-recorded assignment?
Sorry, sir. Sorry, Ibu.
Okay, that's fine. All right, Dimas, please go on with the question and answer.
Okay, so we've got 4 presenters, and the question and answer session is open. So let's start from the first presenter, Teh 3. So anyone would like to ask questions to Teh 3 Nurhasana? Maybe you can raise your hand. Okay, so let's start from Teh Indah first.
Okay, thank you very much, Dimas. Thank you very much, all presenters. I would like to appreciate all of you for the great presentations. And good morning, Ibu Nenden. My question related to the presentation from Teh Tri Nurhasana about interactive teaching and communicative language teaching. My question is, in a real life situation in schools, a lot of teachers and students nowadays still having like some reluctancy to speak with English, in the classrooms. How to stimulate students speaking? Should teacher use like 100% English language in the classroom, or we can use both English and their mother tongues? And how to motivate students who they are active, but they're usually active using their mother tongue, not English language. Will that be any difference in the result for those students who active using both mother tongue and English language, and for those who are being stimulated to use only English in the classroom? Yeah, I guess that's my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, Teh Indah, thank you very much. Oh, yeah. So if you have questions, you may directly text or type in the chat box here, everyone. Yeah. Okay. So Bu Nenden, shall the presenter answer the question one by one, or listen from the 2 participants?
Okay, the first one is you have the students who would like to ask question. You have they have to tell whom the question addressed to. Yeah. Okay, that's number 1. And every presenter should get 2 questions. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
To make
So
it quick, and then why don't you just write? Yeah. Oh, they must have mentioned that. Okay. Go ahead, Dimas.
okay, so the first question came from Teh Indah, and the next question is from Teh Kinanti.
Okay, thank you, Kang Dimas. I will ask to Teh Tri. I want to ask, if students already think that English is a difficult subject, how can teachers change their mind? Okay, and for the next is for Rizky. For Rizky, I want to ask to Rizky, if a good language learner is motivated, then what if the student doesn't have motivation? Does the student not be categorized as a good language learner? Okay, thank you. That's all from me. Thank you, Kang Dimas.
Okay, thank you so much, Teh Indah, and also Teh Kinan. So Teh Tri, the time is yours to answer the questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the question to Teh Indah and also to Kinanti. The first question is how to stimulate the interaction by using English. Whether we have to speak in full 100% English, or maybe we can mix. And also how to motivate a student who usually active in the classroom by using native English, in native language, but in English they are reluctant. Okay. The first one, how to stimulate, just like this. In real life, yes, we know that teachers and also students are some kind of reluctant to use English because of what? Because of the knowledge about English are maybe insufficient. Because of what? Because of their also because of the teacher, from teacher side, for example, we know that because of a lack of the knowledge of English, how to speak well, how to know the lesson. Also because of from the motivation from student, the low motivation is also really relate to the Kinanti question, how to, if student already think that English is difficult, it will be difficult for teacher to change their mind. For example, okay, maybe we have to understand about the motivation, why, because the low motivation that the student have, for example, from the intrinsic, maybe from because of the past experience, maybe from because of like I said before in the previous slide, that some teachers, for example, some teachers speak all the time. So in teachers in
Please
teachers blog,
simplify your question, Tri. That's too long.
okay, sorry, means that teacher and student are reluctant because there lack of reluctant because of low knowledge about English. And also how to motivate student is that by create a welcoming environment, also encourage students to interact positively with a question. Teachers should use a good question, how to make a student to think critically by using, for example, like question how, what if, and also like by using why, not open, sorry, not close answer. I think that's all.
Okay, thank you very much, Three. Okay, so another question coming from Rina. So this question is for Teh Nur Amanah. How do we measure the motivation level of our students? Are there any instruments to analyze it objectively? So Teh Nur Amanah, if you would like to answer this question, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Teherina. The question is how to measure the motivation level. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Measures.
Okay. Unfortunately, my report does not cover how to measure motivation, but I did once read that there are, of course, instruments developed by the psychologist, especially to measure students' level of motivation. For example, the most famous one, I think, because it is repeated in some books and articles, is academic motivation scale. It is an instrument to measure self-determination theory. So in this theory, there are 3 levels of motivation, which is intrinsic, extrinsic, and motivation, which is intrinsic and extrinsic, which are already explained by several researchers. And also there is a motivation, which is a lack of motivation. And then also there are other instruments like student motivational scale and also instructional materials motivational survey, if I'm not mistaken, short for IMMS. It is an instrument to measure students' motivation in a self-directed learning materials. So if you want to know more about this instrument, you can talk to me, or maybe you can search for it, because right now I don't think I can give you an extensive answer. But there are instruments that you can use for measuring levels of motivation.
Okay, thank you so much, Teh Nur. That's clear enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Teh.
Excuse me, ma'am. Can I help Teh Nur to answer the question, because the question relates to my presentation, ma'am?
Yeah, I think just shortly, ya, Kang Surya.
Okay, so in Hermer's book, in the books I've been covering before, he stated that there are no formal, maybe not formal, let's say we can conduct the measuring activity by using questionnaire, and then we can actually directly asking the students what motivates them, how in their learning of English. So it really depends on the teachers to use what kind of measurement. It is stated in Hermes' book actually. So I think that's all from me to add the Tehnur answer.
Okay, thank you very much, Kang Surya. Hope that clarifies the question from Terina. So I saw before Kang Agus raising his hand. Would you like to ask a question, and to whom?
Yeah, thank you very much. There are some questions in the chat room, by the way. So is it okay if I now?
Yeah, just shortly. It's fine.
Okay, right. So my questions goes to Kang Kurniawan Surya. So you mentioned about proficiency level. So as we know, in Indonesia, it's in a big classroom. There are many students who has different proficiency level. So how does a teacher deal with it, and how to? Is there any solutions for the government to provide, like, this is my opinion. So one day the schools teach English based on their the students' proficiency level. So there is a differentiation. So provide certain classrooms, like even though they are in a first grade or second grade, but if their proficiency levels are still in basic, so they go to basic classroom and they go to intermediate later after they pass from the basic level. Can it be a solution for our government to face that solutions? And then as an information, Prof, there are some tasks to examine the students' proficiency levels. There are TOEFL, IELTS, TOEIC, and etc. So as I know, there are three aspects that can identify the students or the test takers' proficiency level. So it's not only about their knowledge or their capability in English, but it depends on their psychology condition. And also, so as I told the students, there are three aspects for getting a good proficiency level score. So first, for the test score, is the knowledge, and the second one is
excuse me, Kang Agus. What is your question?
My questions was how to face that situations in the big classroom to deal with the students whose different proficient levels need to cover by the teachers. Okay, maybe that's all.
Okay, thank you so much.
I'm going to answer the three questions from Mr. Agus, and then from Rindana, and then from Rani in one session. So the first question comes from Pak Agus. The question relating to how to overcome a classroom which the students have a variety of language levels. The one line I'm quite intrigued or interested from Jeremy Harmer is that he stated that we cannot make everyone happy in the classroom. So actually we can plan what's best and what's suitable, let's say the tasks, and then the language used, and then the environment. So let's say we're using group methodology or group discussions. We can use that to promote most of the students happy feeling, or let's say covering the students most of them, let's say their language capability, language proficiency, but we cannot really adjust a classroom which suits all of them. But to overcome that, I think based on the presentation given before me, using interactive language or the mixed language, and then the teachers also need to approach the students if he or she sees students who, let's say, uh, being silent in the corner of the class, and then approaching them might be the best way. So individual approach on students if they feel hardship in the learning. And then the second one regarding um, the psychological the government's possible solution on how to conduct a language classroom. I think in a formal school we cannot do that. We cannot justify the distinction of classroom based on English language proficiency. It can be done in, let's say, outside, let's say, Kumon, and Kumon actually do that. Kumon and then Lia, the classroom are divided based on the students' proficiency level, so it can be done outside the classroom, informal education. It's a formal extra classroom, but in a formal classroom, let's say in schools, we cannot do that because the students who are in the classroom, let's say in the 12th grades, they are there because they achieve the standards before coming to that. So let's say they passed the
Excuse me, Kang Surya, could you please simplify your answer? Thank you.
Okay, so for the government's distinctions, let's say, we cannot do that in a formal, but it can be done in outside, let's say, extra class, such as Lia or and then Kumon. And for the third question from Pak Agus is that dealing with proficiency level which might be affected by psychology. It is true because when I did my IELTS test, it will the psychological feeling or the readiness of me taking the test is also was also a big impact on the results of how I did um, the test. So it means that psychology of the students really affects how they perform in the test. And then the next questions from Rindana in the chat box. She asked how to deal with students' differences in terms of proficiency levels and motivation. So as I said before about proficiency levels diversity in the classroom, we can use a proper measures. So let's say such as using mixed language and individual approach to the students who we might feel a bit silent in the classroom and not knowing what to do, we can approach them individually. So, and then the next is to deal with students' motivation. We can actually see that if students do not feel motivated in our class, he or she will not show the effort. So what we can do is actually change a little bit of the learning experiences. So let's say the students are bored with presentation or teacher centered, we can actually use an outside classroom, and then we ask them to explore the surroundings, or let's say ask them to do group works. So how to deal with motivation is likely to adjust the learning experiences, which might what is it? We think that it can be as a tool to encourage students and then to give them motivation in learning. And then the last question I received from
Kang Kurniawan, so you've got 2 questions, already, right?
5 actually.
No, yeah, I mean like from Kang Agus and also Teh Arin, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's thank you very much, Kang Surya. So let's move on to the next question for Teh Rizky. So for Teh Rizky, let me see. Okay, so the question came from Kinanti. So if a good language learner is motivated, then what if the student doesn't have motivation? Does the student is the student not categorized as a good language learner? So Teh Rizky, would you like to ask the question, answer the question?
Yes, thank you, Kang Bima. So I would like to answer the first question from Teh Kinanti. He asks, what if the students doesn't have motivation? Then the students couldn't categorize as a good language learner. The factor that they could have doesn't have motivation. It could be that they still have a thought that in the teaching learning process, it's the role of teacher that covering the material and the students is only to achieve it. And This kind of students is usually don't know their own motivation, so they don't know how to be responsible in their learning process, or they have a low motivation in teaching learning. So in this term, we did yes, we didn't call it a good language learner, but we call it a poorer student for the students who doesn't have a motivation. But so that's why this is the role of teacher to increase the students' motivation, so they will be motivated to learning, and then be successful, and it could affect their achievement also in their teaching learning process. And for the effort Teh Kinanti, is it clear?
Yes, it's clear. Thank you, Teh Rizky.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And should we move to the second question, Kang?
Yes, the second question is from Teh Indah. What kind of motivation would be able to drive the learners better towards his or her goals of learning English learning, intrinsic or extrinsic, or maybe both equally?
So as Ushu stated in his book, in her book, it's important that it's equally for intrinsic and extrinsic motivation for the students, because it's not adequate for depend only for the students' motivation only. So as I said before in my presentation, it should be teachers, and the classroom situation also should help the students to increase their motivation. So if the situation is sufficient or make the students comfortable in learning, so it could be one of the factor to increase the students' motivation. So yes, it's good that the students should be motivated from the within, because it's a long-term motivation, and it also be good too for the extrinsic motivation to help the students be motivated all the time in teaching learning process. So is it clear, Teh Indah?
Yeah, that's clear. Thank you very much, Teh Rizky dan Nardi.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Teh Rizky and also Teh Indah. We've actually got one more question for Teh Nur Amanah. So the question is coming from me. Teh Nur Amanah, in your own experience, how to motivate students who don't like or even hate English? Thank you.
Thank you, Kang Dimas, for the very interesting question. So first, why the students even like or hate English? We should find the roots of the problems first, because hate is a very strong word. So when someone comes to hate something, there must be a series of events that has caused them to hate that. And I had heard that some students that hate or dislike English often say that or relate that because of how English is very difficult. Maybe because the teacher always teach grammars and also only teach in not a very communicative way, and also related to the teacher's attitude themselves toward the students. So we have to understand the roots of the problem first before we find the solution. And so after we find the roots of the problems, we can design the appropriate lesson plan that we can use that is suitable for the students. So for example, you can use Donye's framework. May I share my screen? Maybe if you want to see.
Yeah, just briefly.
Briefly. So this one, can you see it?
Yeah.
This one, right? So his framework is very extensive. It starts from creating basic motivational conditions. So we have to create conditions that is motivating, and then how to generate initial motivation for the learners, and encouraging positive retrospective self-evaluation so they can evaluate themselves and encourage their autonomy, and then maintaining and protecting their motivation so their motivation can be sustained throughout their learning, and hopefully after the class is over they are always motivated and they can continue to learn by themselves. This is the framework. We can see it in Donye's book. If you are interested, you can ask me. Is that clear, Kang Dimas? Or you want to one more elaboration?
That's clear enough. Thank you very much, Teh Nur Amanah. Okay. Yeah, so Bu Nenden, all of the presenters have got 2 questions each. So we've come to the end of the session.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I really appreciate the presenters for doing a very good job and very responsible for your assignment. So we are going to continue on with the next presenter next week. But before that, I think I would like you to forget the R sound at the end, please. Do you know what I mean? Forget the R sound at the end. So I still hear you mention the word learner, learning, masih kedengaran tadi ya. Please forget the R sound at the end. Don't say there. There. Don't say there, yeah, or there. Says there, there, there. That's there. That's quite enough, yeah. All right. I think you are all good in presenting the content and also the critical analysis. I really appreciate that. And yes, you clap your hand for the presenters, please. Okay. And I feel that you did a very, very good job. But I'm going to take a look at your reading report anyway. Yeah? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think I have to close the session and you may leave the meeting. Not leave the room, but you may leave the meeting.
Ibu, excuse me, could we have one capture a photo session first before we leave the room?
Okay, yes, of course.
Okay. All right, everybody. Cheers. Thank you.
Rambutnya bagus tuh Dimas tuh. Ada jambulnya. Oke.
Ibu, untuk rekaman sesi ini akan saya post di Google Drive yang kemarin ya Ibu ya?
Boleh, boleh.
Ya.